Hello everyone. In today's video, I will try my best to teach you everything I learned about how electricity works in Workers and Resources, Soviet Republic. We will start by looking at the two main sources of electricity, the way I like to think of voltage and wattage, as they are handled in the game. Then the different kinds of power poles, how to split or merge them using switches, how to use transformers to convert high voltage lines into medium voltage ones, also how to deal with different power needs in different areas. In the end I will show you the electricity overlay, and how useful it is to see where exactly you might have bottlenecks in your network. As I said, we will start with the sources of electricity. Broadly speaking, there are two different kinds: imported and domestic production. You can import electricity at certain border crossings. If you see a transformer station next to the customs building, that is where you can either import or export power. At the beginning you will most likely have to import it, but once you have a power station of your own that is generating power uninterrupted, you can switch this foreign power connection to export mode, so you'll be selling instead of buying power. To buy power, first check which of the two global power you will be buying from. If you want to use rubles, make sure you buy from the Soviet border, as shown by the red stars, and if you want to spend dollars, look for a power connection that leads to the Western powers, represented by the blue NATO symbol. After you made sure you'll be spending the appropriate currency, simply select the foreign power connection building, select import mode, and simply set the maximum amount to 100%. This only represents the available capacity of this particular connection, you still only pay as much as you are using. Setting this limit to less than 100% is more relevant when it comes to selling power. From then on, you can use this building as a source of electricity, to a maximum of 18 megawatts. To purchase more, you will have to buy from a different connection. To produce electricity domestically, you will have to build power stations. There are several different kinds: coal, oil, solar, wind, and of course, nuclear. All with their own strengths and drawbacks. Let's talk about measuring electricity next. Just a little disclaimer. I am not an electrician, and my knowledge about the subject comes from watching Electroboom's videos on YouTube. Ergo, what I am going to tell you is definitely not true to real life. Just the way I like to think of them when it comes to this particular game. There are two metrics present in the game that you can use to see how well your network is doing. The first is voltage. I regard this as the amount of power being produced and used. For example, this foreign connection supplies 85 to 90 kilovolts of electricity. That is 85,000 volts on the supply side. If you check this voltage meter on a building that demands power, you will most often see 220 to 230 volts, if the supply is constant. The other important metric is wattage. I prefer to think of this as the bandwidth of the different power lines you use. As I said before, this connection point can supply 18 megawatts of power, so if you use the biggest possible power line on it, which happens to be 18 megawatts too, then that will use up all the possible bandwidth this connection can muster. Next up, power lines. There are two main categories. High voltage lines are mainly used for moving your power over long distances. If the buildings you want to supply are far away from the source, then these are your best option. To distribute power on the local level, you'll have to use medium voltage wires. These can be connected to substations that will supply power to the nearby buildings. To convert high voltage lines into medium voltage ones, and vice versa, you'll be looking for transformer stations. When placing them, you'll notice different size power symbols on the blueprint. The big one is where the high voltage line connects, and the 6 smaller points are where the medium lines can hook up to. Since there are only 6 medium voltage connections on the transformer, and the biggest line that can connect to them can only handle 2.35 megawatts of power, giving a total of 14.1 megawatts of possible bandwidth, connecting the full 18 megawatt line to the high voltage input is not always the most cost-effective option. If you only need a small amount at a location, but still want to use the rest somewhere else, you can use switches to split or merge power lines. Simply build a switch where you want to branch off, and you can choose how much bandwidth is allocated to the new line. In our example we have the full 18 megawatts getting split into a smaller 4 megawatt branch. Just keep in mind that the wires only represent bandwidth, not usage. So if the local usage is, for example, only 2 megawatts instead of the 4 the new branch could theoretically handle, to keep the power going to other areas, you still have 16 megawatts of bandwidth left, so you can build the appropriate line to carry on. However, doing all this mathematics is only necessary if you want to minimize costs, by only building the cheapest power lines that are necessary. Generally speaking, the fewer megawatts the line can handle, the cheaper it is to build. If money is not an issue, then might as well just build the highest capacity lines. Now that we know how to get electricity to an area, let's see how to actually use it. Since we cannot connect every single building to the power network individually, we need to use substations. Don't confuse the in-game substations with their real-life namesake. In this game, substations are used to distribute power in an approximately 350 meters radius. Anything beyond that will not receive power. As we learned before, substations only accept medium voltage wires as their inputs. If you select them, you will see that theoretically they can share 2.5 megawatts of power with their surroundings, but the highest throughput medium power line available in the vanilla game is only 2.35 megawatts. That is the practical maximum wattage for the substations. You will also notice that there are two different numbers listed in the substation window. The first one is the total power throughput required by every single building in the substation's area. If these buildings are only connected to this single substation alone, then this is the amount of wattage we would need to supply to satisfy the power draw. This is what I call virtual demand. As you can see, that is way too much for this substation to deal with alone. The second number is what I call practical demand. This is the number of megawatts the substation will draw from the power network, provided that the buildings in its sphere of influence are connected to more than one substation. If all of those substations are working at peak efficiency, then they will all distribute the load among themselves, lowering the pressure put on a single substation. A general rule of thumb, if the second number starts to get close to 2.35 megawatts, then it is time to build a new substation somewhere nearby. When planning out a power distribution network, try to estimate how much you want to expand a certain area later on. For example, let's say you find a small patch of iron ore in the mountains. The terrain is not suitable to build the entire production chain at this location, so you only need to power the iron mine, and a handful of support buildings to keep this site going. In this case, a single substation will suffice, and there is no real need to plan for more. Building a city, however, is a different matter. Sooner or later, they will need to expand, and it is a good idea to plan for that eventuality. It might be a good idea to have a dedicated transformer nearby, connected to an 18 megawatt power line, having all that power on standby in case the city grows beyond its current power consumption. Lastly, let's take a look at a useful tool, the overlays window. Here you can keep an eye on many aspects of your republic, including electricity. When you open it, the filter for your power network is under the last icon called Building Properties. I suggest setting the distance from camera option to 3000 meters, so you'll still see the information when zoomed out. Here you will have 4 power-related options. The last 2 are for the central heating network. For the purposes of this tutorial, we are interested in the first 2. The button with the voltage meter on it shows just that. The amount of voltage supplied to your buildings. This overlay is useful to quickly tell what areas are low on power. When voltage drops too low, you will start seeing yellow or even red indicators on the map. With this overlay, you can quickly see what areas are experiencing problems, and build substations accordingly. The second button is to see how much wattage is already flowing through your wires. In this mode, you will want to pay attention to the power lines. If they are green, then they are working fine. Once they start to turn yellow, orange, or even red, then it is time to see how to expand that line, because it is getting close to capacity. On this oil refinery district, you see a red, an orange, and a green line. The red line comes out of the power plant, and it gets split into the orange and the green line. The line going to the left is connected to the border connection, selling excess power. Since domestic use of power is prioritized, and I set the connection to sell as much as possible, all the domestic supply is funneled down the green line, the rest are sent to the border. I produce much more power than I use, so the exporting line is under heavier load than the domestic line. And that is all the information I learned while playing. I am almost certain this is not how electricity works in real life, but thinking of voltage as the amount of power, and wattage as the throughput of the different wires, my networks seem to be working fairly well. I hope this video helped you in some way. If it did, leaving a like and subscribing to the channel might just be enough to motivate me to make more. I enjoy making these videos, and hope to start doing the same for other games. Until then, I'll see you around.